Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Grow Through It podcast. My name is Julia, and today we are talking about the highs and lows of personal development. If you've been on a personal development journey for a while, or you want to start, this episode will help you to understand that it's not always easy or glamorous, but it's always worth it. So often we hear about the wins and the breakthroughs and the transformations when it comes to personal development. But I don't think the journey is talked about enough. The bad weeks, the doubts, the feeling of being stuck or going backwards. That's what we're going to dive into today. Personal growth is never linear. It comes in waves. It's just not realistic to constantly grow without any setbacks or plateaus. My personal development journey has had constant ups and downs. I have bad weeks, I fall off with my goals, I feel unmotivated, I get sick, I take breaks. But this doesn't mean I'm failing, and if you're going through the same thing, it doesn't mean you're failing either. This is something Paul taught me, and it's helped him a lot. When you have a bad week, it may feel like you're doing a bad job or going backwards, but you're not. If you were to look at your personal development on a graph and you zoomed out, the line would still be going upward. You wouldn't see the little dips in those bad weeks if you zoom out. It can be hard to see it when you're in it, but remind yourself to zoom out and know you are still going upward. One week doesn't define your journey. I want to give you a more visual example of this. Imagine you're climbing a mountain. When you're halfway up and you stop for water, all you can see are the rocks around you and you feel stuck or like you have so much left to do. But if you zoom out and you see the whole mountain, you realize you've already climbed so far. Our brains love progress, but struggle with plateaus, which is why this can be hard to feel in the moment. As humans, we are wired to seek rewards because it's how our brains keep us motivated. Progress triggers the release of dopamine, which is the feel-good neurotransmitter. Our brains evolved to reward quick wins because back in the day, survival depended on it. Finding food, shelter, and safety. Today, that same wiring applies to our goals, which is why we love visible progress and struggle when things slow down. So when you make progress, whether it's hitting a fitness goal, finishing a book, or sticking to a habit, your brain gets a dopamine boost. This creates a positive feedback loop. Progress releases dopamine, which gives you motivation, which results in more progress. That's why personal development feels so exciting in the beginning. Your brain is thriving on that newness and the progress. So when we plateau, this can be hard on us because we feel like nothing is changing. This triggers the opposite response. Less dopamine, less motivation, and more frustration. When we stop seeing obvious progress, the brain reduces dopamine release. Without that reward signal, you feel less motivated even if you're still making invisible progress. We also tend to expect quick results. When the results slow down, however, our brains interpret that as failure, even though it's not. In reality, growth naturally slows as you improve. For example, if you were to lose 50 pounds, those first 50 might be a lot easier than the next 20. I want to touch on something that I think slows down personal development for a lot of us: comparison. When we compare ourselves to other people, we're basically measuring our progress against someone else's timeline. And the problem with that is that you're running your race, not theirs. You have different experiences, different challenges, different values, and different goals. So when you're constantly looking sideways, you're actually taking energy away from your own growth. Comparison also tricks our brains into thinking we're behind, which creates frustration and self-doubt, which makes it way harder to stay consistent and motivated. Instead of comparing, try redirecting that energy inward. Ask yourself, am I further ahead than I was 3 months ago? What's one thing I've done recently that the old me would be proud of? Where can I focus my energy this week to feel aligned with my goals? When you shift the focus from where everyone else is to where you are and where you're headed, you take back control of your growth. That's when personal development becomes sustainable, because it's based on your own timeline, not somebody else's highlight reel. During plateaus, even though it may not feel like you're progressing, a lot is actually happening. Your brain is rewiring habits, your identity is shifting, and you're laying down the foundation for the next step. There are a couple ways to work with your brain during these plateaus instead of fighting it. The first one is measuring micro wins. Don't just look at the big picture of your goals. Break it up into tiny milestones so your brain gets more dopamine hits. Instead of focusing on losing 10 pounds, celebrate nourishing your body with healthy food that day. Instead of focusing on growing your Instagram following, celebrate each post you make. When was the last time you celebrated a tiny win? It's something we often forget to do. The second thing is to try new things. Dopamine loves newness, so try a new personal development practice, switch up your environment, or listen to a different type of podcast or book than you usually do. The third thing is to zoom out, like I already mentioned. Remind yourself that a plateau isn't failure, it's preparation. Look back at where you started 6 months ago, not just where you are today. The fourth way to work with your brain is to focus on joy, not just progress. Tie growth to things you enjoy and your brain will stay more motivated. Have small things to look forward to throughout your week or month, like trips, self-care rituals, or fun projects. I'll get more into this a little later on. It is so important to stay patient when results aren't instant. Trust that you are still growing and evolving, even if you don't feel like it in the moment. It's also important to enjoy the journey, not the outcome. I've been reading about this a lot lately. We are often so focused on the end result, we forget to be present and enjoy the journey to get there. It's not actually about the end result at all. It's about what you learn through the process. Personal development can sometimes feel repetitive. Paul and I have talked about this a lot. We read a lot of these types of books, but when you're constantly reading them month after month, many of the same concepts will be talked about. It can get repetitive and feel like you aren't learning anything new. Now, this isn't a bad thing. We can do a couple different things when this happens. The first one is at some point you have to shift from consuming to implementing. Instead of just reading one book after the other or listening to several podcasts a day, pause and think about what you learned. I actually have trouble with this sometimes. I'm so excited to read or listen to the next thing, I often forget to actually take that information in. I've been reading a passage from The Pivot Year by Brianna Wiest daily. I'll admit, sometimes I read it and then I instantly press play on a podcast episode without even thinking about what I just read. This obviously is not very beneficial. I've been trying to make more of a conscious effort to reread that passage and sit and think about what I just read. Think about the last book or podcast you consumed. Did you actually sit with it, or did you just move on to the next thing? Be honest with yourself. Like I said, you have to integrate what you learned into your life. Don't just read the information and not change anything. Even if it's just one takeaway from a book or a podcast, try to actually make that change in your life. Another way we can shift when things feel repetitive is to explore different perspectives or practices. Instead of just always listening to the same person, listen to multiple different people that you align with. Sometimes I'll accidentally listen to someone who I don't align with or agree with. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it's something I think people often avoid. But when I hear them say something I don't agree with, it makes me think about what I actually believe. It also motivates me to talk about those things. Many of my podcast episode ideas have come from this scenario. I mentioned this earlier, but sometimes I can get bored just reading personal development books constantly. When this happens, I pivot. I may read a book about business or finances, or a book that tells a story. There have been a couple books I've read that tell a story, and within that story, there's a clear message. These are still personal development books, but it's a different feel than just reading information. I also started reading fiction books alongside my personal development books. I try and have variety in what I consume, not just the same things over and over. Another important thing to do when it comes to personal development is to reassess your goals. As you go through life, things change. Your priorities change, your outlook changes, your body changes, and your goals will change too. This is why it's important to take time to reevaluate. Clinging to old goals will hold you back. For example, on my 2025 bingo card, I wrote down that I want to take my Master Reiki course. However, with everything going on in my life, my priorities have shifted. I am now more focused on healing my body, spending time with people I love, and taking care of myself. That's no longer a goal for me right now. I'm sure it will be in the future, but I have shifted. You might have had a goal to lose weight. Let's say you've already lost 40 pounds. Reassess and see if weight loss is still a priority for you, or if you'd like to shift to putting on muscle now or maintaining your weight. You may have had a goal to travel, and you've traveled to so many amazing places. Reassess and see if this is still aligned with you, or if you want to focus on other things like growing a family. Check in with yourself on your goals often. Ask yourself, does this goal still excite me? Am I doing this for me or because I feel like I should? Sometimes we hold on to old goals because we think changing them means we failed, but it doesn't. It means you've grown. Your values have shifted, and that's something to celebrate, not judge. Is there a goal you're holding on to just because you feel like you should? I touched on this earlier, but it's also extremely important to have things to look forward to. Like I said, dopamine boosts keep us energized during slow growth phases. So find those dopamine boosts. The anticipation of doing something fun brings us happiness, which increases motivation. These can be little or big things that you look forward to. Little things like coffee dates, solo walks, a new podcast episode, or working out. Big things can include trips, events, and milestones. Paul has an adventure every single weekend, whether it's snowboarding, hiking, or something else exciting. This gives him motivation to maintain his habits throughout the week. It feels less monotonous because he is excited about it. Working out, eating healthy, and reading personal development books allows him to do these things. I personally really enjoy my days off. I look forward to those days and plan things like seeing friends, going on a solo date, or going for a hike. If I didn't have these things to look forward to, my life would feel pretty boring and repetitive, and that would decrease my dopamine, which, as you know, decreases motivation and drive. So what's one thing you're looking forward to this week? If you don't have anything, start implementing this. So let's recap on what I talked about. Number 1, zoom out. Progress isn't measured by one bad day or week. Number 2, pause and integrate. You don't need more information. You need to apply what you know, or pivot and learn something new. Number 3, reassess your goals. It's okay to change your goals if your desires change. Number 4, add joy. Plan things that make you excited for the future, whether they're big or small. Remember, you're not behind, you're not failing, you're growing, and growth is messy. If you've been feeling stuck or frustrated lately, maybe this is your reminder to zoom out, breathe, and give yourself grace. You're much farther along than you think you are. Don't beat yourself up if you don't achieve a goal as fast as you thought you would, or if you have a bad week. It is so normal and part of the journey. And remember, growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. That is it for today's episode, but before we go, let's pause and integrate what we learned today. Take out your journal or just think about it. I'm going to be silent for the next few seconds, but pause this episode if you need more time. I know you might have the urge to skip this part, but let's really try to start integrating what we learn. So let's reflect. What is one takeaway from this episode, and how will you start using it in your life? Thank you for doing that with me. I really hope this episode helped you understand the highs and lows of personal development better and helped you feel understood and gave you a bit of relief. If you have any questions about today's episode, feel free to DM me on Instagram at growthroughit.pod, or you can use the link in the show notes to ask anonymous questions or suggest future topic ideas. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would rate, review, follow, or subscribe, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it. Thank you so much for listening, and remember that you are worthy. See you next time.